All right, awesome.
All right. Well, I'll just kind of get things started. So great to have you all here. As Jen said, on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, we are so excited to be able to talk with you guys about how to help the athletes that you know. And by the way, just keep in mind that all the things that we're going to talk about apply to performance in other areas of life as well, not just athletics and sports. But that is one of the key areas that we really want to focus on and address here during our Elite Performance Academy. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, guys. All right. So I'm gonna just go through this, and we're going to. I'm still letting some folks in, so this is perfect timing. Some of the questions you guys asked. So when you filled out and joined this class, you asked some questions, and some of them were that we're gonna get to is basically how does my teen and how does my athlete communicate with their coaches, with us as parents, with teammates when things don't seem to be going their way? What is the formula or what is the key that's going to help them have those tools in their toolbox? Because this is huge. They want to be able to communicate, and sometimes they don't know how because they have pressure. Lots of pressure going on. Another thing is how to raise a competitive youth to be a good sportsman, not to get mad, not to want to talk, about the other team and kind of because it gets cutthroat, right? As competitive people, we all know what that feels like. So it's how to break that and that cycle of wanting to just go at them and to be able to talk to them in a way and about them, the other team, in a way that is good for them. And then the last thing is how do you praise your child, your athlete, for doing good sportsmanship and character and not just on their performance base. So Dr. Beach is going to talk to us about that. And this is an open forum, you guys. We want you to communicate. We want you to be in the chat box. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat box. And this is going to be something that we would love for you to kind of ask questions. And when we have the right time, I'll get them to John and he's going to be able to support you. So enjoy this time. You've got this like one-on-one with this sports psychologist and peak performance coach and a teen coach. So this is a really special opportunity. So, all right, John, I'm going to pass it. Actually, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jenn Brown, and I am make sure I let everybody in. I am a teen and young adults coach, life coach, and I work with teens and young adults on how to move forward throughout life with some confidence and motivation. And a lot of times there's big blocks going on in their life. Listen, you guys, y'all know being a teen is hard. It comes with all the technology and all the pressures and all these people coming at them, and they just kind of melt. So this is where I step in and work with people and families to kind of overcome these issues, and it's just so much fun. And so now I'm going to pass the torch to John, and he's going to talk a little bit about what he does.
That's right. And I can also, by the way, before I introduce myself, just really praise Jen and say that, I trust Jen enough. Not only have we done coach training together, and so really gotten to work with each other and kind of develop our skills as coaches, but I've gotten to really see how she helps young adults. And so I trust my 18-year-old daughter to work with her, and she's really helped her prepare for college and really start out college in a successful way. So definitely a big believer in Jen's ability to help teenagers and young adults for sure. And then my name is Dr. John Beach. I am a performance coach in a nutshell. And so background in psychology. And then I went back to school and did basically the equivalent of another master's after getting a doctorate in performance psychology. I've really realized that while I love helping people understand their mind and how to use it as a tool, the folks that I love using those tools with the most are people that are in a performance arena and that are really motivated to get to the next level, really good to great. And so the motivation behind that, and I also use that in business world. I help business leaders, businesses that are transitioning, businesses that want to get to the next level as well. And so really the same things we're talking about here are going to apply in your business, in your work life, right? And so the real motivation for this came as I started looking back on my early performance career. You know, I played baseball and tennis were my primary sports, and I been a very great, very high level performance. You know, our school won state 3 out of the 4 years that I was in high school in tennis, but my performance varied greatly. There were times when I could beat other athletes that I really even shouldn't be able to beat. And guess what? There were times when I would lose to other tennis players when I should never have lost to them, right? So what I realized and learned was I had no idea that there was a mental side of my game. So that's why I love doing what I do, is really helping athletes. And I work with professional musicians, business leaders as well, anyone in a performance realm, helping them have the tools that are the exact things that I lacked and needed to really get to the very best. So it's really helping people get to the level that they're capable of. That's what I love doing. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. That's right. And I just want to jump right in real quick, John, and talk about, listen, this chat box is open, and what we're presenting to tonight, it's really kind of for the parents. Like, we wanted to get y'all wrapped up in this and to see, like, man, I'm getting this first rate, like, interaction here for free today. And as you think forward, when we start presenting the course, I want you to start thinking, this is for you too, because no one better than yourself to work with your athlete than you, right? This also course coming up is also for your athlete. Okay. So it's for parents, it's for athletes, for coaches. So we just really want you to know, like, when you meet with John, if you were to meet with him one-on-one, what you're going to get this entire course for would be for one session one-on-one with him. So we just want to already put out, like, what a wealth of gold this is for you and your family. I also want to talk about that, gone blank. So we're going to stop there. So I'm going to pass the torch to you, and you guys can get into the nitty gritty, and anything you want to put in the chat, I will get to John. So use it.
All right. So let's kind of go over our objectives for today. Really, we want to talk a bit about why sports psychology, why is it important? We want to dive into a bit about optimal sport parent. What does that look like to be an optimal sport parent? And how can you become that optimal sport parent? How do parents introduce their kids to sport, and what's the best way to introduce their kids to sport? Some of you all probably have athletes that are already in sports, and so they've already been introduced, but I think it's really good to back up and think about what's an ideal way to do that, and how do we typically do that now? How do we communicate with our athlete? When, how, where? What does that look like? How do we communicate with coaches, et cetera? And one of the mental skills that we're going to really dive into here a bit more, to give you a sample of the things that we're going to be doing in the course, the 4-week course after today, is we'll give a sample of, this is kind of, we're going to take one of those mental skills and really drill down a bit deeper on. So you'd get a sense of, this is the type of thing that my athlete could really learn more about in this program. And I can learn more about as a parent or a coach, et cetera. And then, of course, we want to save some time for question and answers. We're going to try to address some of the great things that you guys have presented already to us as maybe challenges you face, things you'd like to learn more about. And Jen alluded to some of those already. I'm going to add some more to that as well. Some of you were able to kind of give us a bit of feedback on, these are some things I want to work on that I struggle with my athletes. So we're going to get into that a bit as well. So let's dive right in. Okay. First of all, why sports psychology? I mentioned to you that I realized that it's exactly what I needed and didn't have when I was a young athlete growing up, and I worked like crazy on the physical side of my game, but it was the mental side that held me back. Right. The favorite, famous quote, Yogi Berra: 90% of the game is half mental. Now, what did Yogi Berra mean? 90% of the game is half mental, right? His math is off, right? Well, if anyone knows Yogi Berra, we really don't know exactly what he meant, right? The guy was famous for quotes that really didn't exactly make sense, but they made you think. And so what we do know about that quote is that Yogi Berra, as a former baseball player and then manager, was clear that when you get to so I'm going to kind of give you my best interpretation of Yogi Berra is I believe that what he meant is when you get to a certain level, that 90% of the game is developing that side, and that it's at least as important as working on the physical side, right? And so the question I have is how much, and a little bit of a challenge, is how much time is your athlete working on the mental side of their game? If you are a parent or a coach, how much time are you working on the mental side of your game? If you're a business leader or owner, I know we have some of those on the screen today, on the call today. My friend Patrick Flores here, for example, runs a restaurant, right? So how much time are we doing that? Or are we just focusing on kind of the physical side or other areas, right? Well, here's what we know is that developing the mental side can either be two ways to look at the two sides of the same coin. One is if you develop the mental side of your game, it is a hidden advantage because I'm telling you, unfortunately, the majority of folks out there, at least especially in youth sports, even into high school sports, and then a little bit more into college, certainly more into professional sports, right? Work with all those athletes. The further you go up, the more they recognize the need for it. But even at the highest levels of sport, most athletes are not working on it a ton. Okay, so it's a huge advantage if your athlete is not working on that side. The other way to think about it is if you don't work on the mental side, then you are going to hit a ceiling where all the physical training in the world is going to somehow plateau fairly early because you have to be balanced as a performer. Okay. And so different ways to think about it, but either way, it is so valuable and important. And really the key is not just so when I'm working with an athlete one-on-one, it's a lot of what I do is a lot of one-on-one work. Then I work with teams as well. But one-on-one, I start by going through each of the mental skills and really assessing their level of confidence, awareness, and confidence and ability to use those skills, right? And so that's the first step is understanding the education, the awareness. Then it goes into the practice, right? And using them on a regular basis, just like anything else. If you're not using those mental skills regularly, then they're not going to really work for you as much. And so what we know is a huge percentage of families these days do all sorts, and understandably so. They do so many different ways that they develop their athletes physically. They will enter them in school sports. They will do select or club ball. They will invest in private coaching, right? But how much do you focus, and does your athlete focus on the mental side of their game? And that's the big question, right? Because if they're not, they're missing out, right? And it can be very difficult. By the way, I want to pause here, okay? I am not coming at you all from a perspective of parenting and sport parenting is easy. And, looking at you guys with judgment over here as if I'm at a different place. Not only am I a sports psychologist and performance coach, I am an athlete's parent myself, right? I have my daughter was a high school. She was the colonel of her dance team, the leader of her dance team, and went on to A&M. She was very different from my son, who is a freshman and a pole vaulter primarily. And so I have to face the exact same challenges that you all do in terms of what things work, what things are challenging. And so I mess it up too. Okay. So I am not perfect in that, but I want you to know I'm in the game too. I'm in the fight as well. And it can be very challenging. So let's just go through what is sports psychology. Well, one of the key elements of sports psychology is understanding the 9 mental skills and being aware of them, right? So one of the things that I often focus on is really helping my athletes be aware of what are the things within their control, what are the things out of their control. And I ask them to have 2 boxes. Again, this applies to all of you in business, life, work, right? 2 boxes. One of them are the things that are outside of their control. Because I hear things about that all the time from my athletes, right? I hate that pool. Every time we swim at that pool, there's too much chlorine. I don't want to compete at that school, at that, you know, that natatorium or whatever. Or, oh, I hate that field. You know, the conditions are terrible. And so they talk often about variables that are outside their control. Just yesterday, Saturday, my son was in a pole vault competition with 17 other schools with a 20-mile-an-hour wind. Do you think that the wind that's, you know, blowing consistently at 20 plus miles an hour affects a pole vaulter? Absolutely. Do you think that there were very many athletes that PR'd yesterday? No. But what was really great to see, there were a smaller number of athletes that competed. And it was a great opportunity to see that sometimes just showing up is a huge percentage of it. Some of them got further than anyone would ever imagine. And some of them actually got a lot of points for their teams because other teams didn't show up. Maybe it was spring break was part of that. Maybe it was the wind, right? But those are some of the things in our control, our attitude and our effort. So I have athletes really develop their best attitude and figure out when is it not their best attitude and how to change that.
And John,
Concentration. Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
I was going to jump in. So I see this a lot at my sixth graders in the baseball world, and I see this all the time. If you notice, and you're in the baseball world, you walk up and if they strike out or they hit a foul or something, you can see head down, shoulders down. You can see them check out. And I'm sure this is in any sport you do. And of course it is, but this is when I start to see that attitude, that control, that lack of control feeling. So this is important, that this is such an important piece that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And a couple of parents that are joining us today talked about baseball, talked about especially how their athletes handle things at the plate. I have a lot of baseball players that I work with because baseball is truly a game of failure, meaning that the very best batters at the highest level strike out a huge percentage of the time, about 2/3 of the time, actually. And so you can be the, kind of Hall of Famer and fail at the plate 2/3 of the time, right? And so sometimes what we see at the plate is sometimes it's body language. Sometimes you can see it all over them. And so that's one of the things that we talk about a lot about is demonstrating that no coach, the other team, et cetera, should ever be able to see your body language stink, right? If you're slumping your shoulders and putting your head down, that pitcher knows they've got you. This guy or gal, they're frustrated, right? They're out of it. I've got them. It gives them a hidden advantage, right? So being aware too, that attitude connects with body language. There's been a lot of research that actually demonstrates that when we have our chest high, we sometimes even people talk about having kind of a warrior pose that you stare at yourself in the mirror before you go out to do a presentation or you show up to the baseball field or other arena, that it really can contribute to your confidence, right? And just the opposite too. It can really cause you to slump as well and cause you to have, really bad posture. And then that just impacts brain chemistry and everything else. They've just, they've shown, for example, that just by smiling, it actually triggers positive brain chemicals, right? So of course, if that's the case, the small movement can actually create positive energy, positive brain chemicals. What do you think slumped over shoulders are going to do? What do you think your head down is going to do, right? So that's a big part of it.
And you're going to cover this more. You're going to cover this more in the class as we go on with the athlete.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Big time. And so we'll talk a little bit more too about kind of how do you handle that if you see that in your athlete. What will you do? How will you help them, right? And then, of course, I'll be helping the athletes themselves as well, right? For example, Andy Ozuna, I hope he's on. I don't know if he's through Stephen or what, but I hope he's here. But he talked about, self-awareness, negative emotion, and negative self-talk in baseball, right? Self-talk's the fourth element, right? And so being aware of how you're talking to yourself is huge. I know for a fact that my self-talk hurt me in tennis as a young athlete because if I'd make an easy mistake, I would beat myself up. And so we talk about being your own best ally. And so how would you talk to your own best friend and really being much more aware of how you're talking to yourself, thinking to yourself, etc. Right? The brain is such a powerful tool, and the mind is just how you use that brain. And so really being able to use self-talk to spur yourself on, to inspire yourself, and to encourage yourself is huge. We talk a lot about mental imagery and visualization. If you watch the Olympics this summer, I've got an athlete competing, by the way, I can't wait to watch her compete. If you're watching them, let's say the gymnasts, right? You might be watching them. Before they do their routine, you will see them go through in their mind, let's say it's their floor routine, you'll see them going through that in their mind and picturing every move before they go. There's so much research that shows if we can picture it in our mind first, our body is going to be exponentially more able to do it after that. There's a great study they did with basketball free throw shooting. We've got a couple basketball parents on here. And they demonstrated 3 groups of athletes. One group that took shots for 30 minutes every day. One group that took shots for 15 minutes. Actually, I think it was an hour. That's what it was. Practice an hour, one group. Practice 30 minutes with the shooting, and then do 30 minutes of visualization. Then the other group, 1 hour of just visualization. And what they found was relatively, the group that did, of course, visualization and shooting did far better. But believe it or not, the group that only visualized had an exponential growth in what they were able to do as well. And so we've demonstrated through mirror neurons. I won't go into the details of that, but we have these parts of our brain that really make it possible. If we picture it first, we are going to be much more able then to do it in our mind. And of course, a lot of my athletes end up getting into negative mental imagery, and that hurts them as well. We'll talk more about anxiety management later, but managing emotions and really making sure that we understand that we're human, so we will have those emotions, yet how we manage them is going to be key. And so making sure that when we are in the middle of a game or in the middle of a competition, that our emotions are not the rattler at Six Flags. If anyone's familiar with the Six Flags here in San Antonio area, the largest wooden roller coaster at one time is called the Rattler. We don't want our emotions to be the rattler. We want our emotions, though, to be more like a kiddie ride. They're going to be there, but we don't want them to go up and down too high when we make a great play or too low when we make an easy mistake, right? And so being able to help athletes manage that is really important. Then, of course, people skills. That's the one that sometimes my athletes seem most surprised about. How is people skills, a mental skill? Well, people skill has to do with how you communicate things to coaches, how you communicate things like injuries, how you communicate, things that that you want to work toward, maybe earning more playing time. How do you do that, right? One of our parents asked about, kind of that's more from a parent perspective, but how do you kind of, hold the coaches accountable without making things worse for your kid, right? And I would say in a nutshell, carefully, right? Very carefully. But I would say if my child wasn't getting enough playing time, what I would probably do is encourage them to advocate for themselves first. Of course, even more so the older they are, right? And then if they've gotten chances to do that, but it hasn't worked, then and only then what I would do is set up a meeting with the head coach or manager and talk with them about, Coach, I'd like to help you be able to maximize the potential of my son or daughter. And I want to share with you what I've seen with them. And that is when they receive positive feedback, they really are receptive to it, and it really spikes their confidence. But they have an aversion for some reason, negative feedback. And I know you need to give it a lot, but I just want to hear you that when they receive that from us, they seem to really shrink down. And so if you can look for opportunities, just encourage them a bit, they really will respond well. We notice that, etc. So that's just one example of the types of things that we'll get into there. Okay.
All right.
All right. Go ahead, Jen.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was going to say let's come into the chat. Y'all chime in and let me know what's going on over there. Are you getting some good information? I know hearing about like the mirror neurons, that was very interesting to hear about the shooting and the visualization. What is something that you're picking up on that you're saying, all right, I got this and I can put it in my toolbox. So when my kid is getting frustrated or getting, overwhelmed, that you're like, I can use this. So go ahead and use the chat and we'll chime back around here in a second. So, but I'm curious to hear what you're hearing that you like.
Yeah.
All right, John, go on with optimal sport parenting.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about this as parents. And again, we got some athletes on too, which is awesome. I love it. I'd like you to answer this question. I'd like to ask you yourself this question first, and then I'd like you to answer this. And again, this can also be what makes an optimal leader of a restaurant, what makes an optimal manager of a business team as well, right? But when you think of that, what comes to mind? Put in the chat, if you will, some elements that you think would make an optimal sport parent. As you're doing that, I want you to think that, so whenever I'm coaching a team, and I've coached my daughter's softball, basketball, son basketball, tennis, baseball. I've coached so many different things. And I always start at the beginning of the year by pulling parents aside and I ask them this question. And we put it out on a big whiteboard so that we can be in the mindset before we start the season that we want to all be optimal sport parents this season, right? And it's not just about our kids, but it's about us being a team and being a community, a village, if you will, that's going to support those athletes to not only be a great team, but also to be great people outside. And so one of the questions asked about that, about one of the parents asked a little bit about how do you develop character and things like that. And that's one of them, is to kind of work as a community to say coaches are going to be working with parents and athletes, that we're going to all work together to try to develop, really good values and really be good people. And so we want to be able to demonstrate that. But also, it's also a way that we can go back to that if we need to. If there is a parent that we see maybe is having a somewhat of a negative impact on their athlete, or vice versa, or on the team, or being negative or things like that, or yelling or distracting or whatever, we can go back to that and kind of see. But what are some of the comments, Jenn, or things, feedback that folks have about what makes an optimal sport parent?
Yeah, awareness to those around you and awareness to
Yeah.
your team. Yeah, supporting the kiddos
Absolutely.
through good games and hard games. Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awareness is a big one for sure. And awareness of how does my son or daughter respond when I cheer them on, right? I know when I think about, my son in pole vaulting, we're often actually very close to where they vault. And so we can make comments, right there. It's not like a busy baseball diamond or football field, even more so, where your kid might hear what you say. I've heard stories from my athletes, by the way, about those situations. And still, please be mindful about what you do say out loud and be careful with that, and make it encouraging for sure. But boy, we're right there. And so we got to think about before they vault, does that athlete respond well when we like encourage them? You got this. This is yours. Or does that affect them negatively? And being aware of that is the key. So awareness is always the biggest part of that. I think awareness with my athletes, helping them be more aware of the mental skills they're using, the self-talk they're using. But parents, are you aware of how your son or daughter is responding to you and giving advice, or you parenting? One of the questions, that I think is always important to ask yourself is, and it's kind of on the next page, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but should I parent? I'm sorry, should I coach? We don't have a choice. We're parenting our children. We're going to be doing that no matter what. But should I coach my child? And of course, the answer is it depends, right? But I think the keys to that are, do you have an in-depth knowledge of the sport is very helpful. And if not, really educating yourself clearly on it, because I think that's very important. So then you really understand when refs make mistakes or things like that. If you're the coach, It's going to be very important that you know those things very well. Is there someone else that's available? And sometimes if there's not, we have to jump into that role, right? But most importantly, does our son or daughter really want us to coach? Do they not? And is it helpful? And I'll tell you that from my own experience, I've experienced the positive and negatives of my father being my coach. He was very helpful at teaching me the basics of tennis, and he was very good at it. But once I reached a certain level and I could beat him on the court as an adolescent, I thought that meant he didn't have anything to offer me anymore. And so it really made it hard for me to receive good coaching from him. And that was selfish on my part, but I was a kid. And so what he, I think, really would have been helpful for me is if he recognized that and said, I'm going to really pass this on and let someone else, teach and coach this person and coach me. That would have been great. And so I really try to be aware of that. I don't do it perfectly, of course. For example, one of the things that we'll talk about is when do you talk to your kid about, when's a good time to talk? We'll get into that as well. And that's something that I recognize the challenges of myself as well. But really an optimal sport parent, I think we would probably all agree. By the way, any other additions to that, Jen?
Yeah, I've got a few. So here comes somebody else. Okay. Asher says balances the importance of the moment to your child with the importance of the moment in the grand scope of life. So finding that balance between the sport and life. And then Christy said, we never discuss the game right afterwards. We just say, I had a lot of fun watching you play, being aware that they know what they did wrong or messed up on, and we don't need to point it out again, letting them bring it up.
We're going to get into that on the next slide too. So, but that's great, Christy. I love that.
Talking to you, Dad. Well, I mean, we're learning, just like you. We're learning. That's why we're listening to it.
All right. I think somebody's, let me see if I can.
Yes, we are always learning. I don't know if that was Christy there, but we are always learning, and we need to be, right? We need to really have a mindset that says we're always learning, a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. And so as parents, as coaches, as leaders, we're always learning. Absolutely. And so we're going to mess some things up as long as we learn from it. But yeah, we're going to save that a little bit more here in a moment. But so someone who's aware, someone who's thinking about not just this game or this moment, but the bigger picture. Absolutely. And how it connects with their life, right? How receptive is my son or daughter to me being involved at this level? I have golfers that I work with, and often with golf, the parent might be following them. They might even be their caddy for a while. But some of my golfers recognize that they feel too much pressure when their parent is that close, following them the whole time. And some parents can really pull it off, but some parents can't. And so I've had some parents that say, I have to take a step back. I watch on certain holes. I don't watch every hole. Or I meet them at the beginning, I meet them at the end, or you have to figure that out, kind of what works best. But the key is communicating with your athlete about that, right? Et cetera. Yeah. And I would say in a nutshell, an ideal sport parent is engaged and involved and present, but is mindful of the level that they need to really be involved, is mindful of that and what's helpful and what's not, and not over committed, not over connected to it emotionally, physically, right? So again, maybe not coaching if think it's going to be better for your son or daughter to be coached by someone else. Our kids often listen to other people better than they listen to us about many things. And I want to share, I have to admit it right here, pull the curtain back on the Wizard of Oz, right? Is a lot of times what I'm saying to athletes is the same things that you might have said to them or that you would say, but it's from a different angle, from a different perspective, from a different type of expert, and they're often really receptive to it more so. And I recognize that in my own son. I've so many times coaching him in baseball, be like getting my assistant coach and saying, hey, would you maybe see if he's aware of this? Would you talk with him about this? Would you encourage him? Would you instruct him on how to do this? Because it doesn't seem like he's doing it right or he's aware, but you tell me and you tell him, right? You see it. And he would listen to that. so much more than he might listen to me, right? Yeah.
And
So
what
then,
I
go
was
ahead,
gonna,
Jen.
yeah, I was just gonna say what I always jump into is it's not personal. This is not personal towards the parents, and I coach this with my families too. A lot of times, if my husband's coaching and he doesn't listen, or John's coaching his son, they don't listen, and then it can feel personal that they're not listening. It's not. It's just not the best route. The end goal is that they can fix whatever is not working for them. So keep that in mind.
That's right.
What's the end goal? And it's not personal.
Absolutely. It's not personal. Yes. And really being aware that all of us, I'd say if there's anything that's like a common meme or a common mistake that we think about parents making, of course, you hear about it all the time, is, oh, that parent is like, living out their past, inabilities or their past accomplishments that they didn't get to make. They're living it out through their kid, right? They didn't get to play at this level, and so they're playing through their kid. But we have to also be honest that sometimes we can all get caught up in that a little bit and like make it personal. If our kid's not getting opportunities to play or opportunities at the positions that they want, we can all sometimes get caught up in that because we do sometimes want a lot. We want so much for our kids to have a great opportunity, especially if we maybe didn't, or if we did but didn't take advantage of it. So I think we need to go at that without judgment as well. But again, with awareness, right? To push or not to push is one of the items I wanted to get to. And again, the short answer, we can get a lot more into that, one-on-one, but it depends, right? Who is your child? But in a nutshell, I would say it needs to be coming from them, right? There is a ton of research in the world of sports psychology on motivation. And the best motivation is intrinsic, internal motivation. And so if you can find ways to develop motivation that is already there, that is the key. And not because sometimes, guess what? We can actually diminish our kids' internal motivation by adding external motivation on there, right? And so being aware of that, something we would talk much more about. Yeah.
All right,
So
John, I'm gonna remind you got about 5 to 8 minutes before we can open up to Q&A.
All right. We talked a bit about this one as well already. So should you coach your child? The drive home. I think it was Christy that brought it up already, I believe, and nailed it, right? When do you talk? I think Gary asked a bit about when do you talk to your kid about the game and things like that. The drive home is not the place. And guess what? Here's self-disclosure. I know this, I teach this, I coach it, but I found myself driving home from the meet the other day, starting to do it, wanting to do it as I worried that we might not have a chance to. I caught myself after a little bit of a start of a discussion and was able to just bite my tongue. That can be very difficult. But here's the thing. On the drive home, your son or daughter is processing so much information. They probably don't even know how they did it at that point, or they may be really hyper-focused on a mistake that they made or something that they did, and they may already be very clear about the mistakes that they made or the things that they did wrong. And that may be what they're kind of stuck on and thinking about, but they may also want nothing to do with conversation after that game's over. They just want to get home and rest. And so what I would say is I would encourage you to talk about any other thing until these things are met. So we talk a lot of times in the world of psychology about problems happen with our kids when they're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? Well, after a game or a tournament, they are probably 2 or 3 or 4 of those things, right? They're probably hungry. They're probably tired. They may be angry or upset about the outcome or how they played. And so they really need to kind of get some of those needs met before they even have a chance to really have a good conversation with you, or it's so likely to go south. And so I would say, let's kind of get those things taken care of. Let's get home, maybe a little snack, and maybe then you talk a bit about it. But I would encourage you to use kind of a limited approach. And I like to think about, hey, what's a positive and a room for improvement. Give me something that you're aware of that you did well, because that's what we want athletes to be aware of, is we want them to be aware of the things that they did well. Athletes need to have a good memory for their best plays and like amnesia for their mistakes, right? And that's one of the things we go into a lot in sports psychology, is how to help them move past mistakes quickly, right? But we want to help them do that. And so, hey, what's something that you did really well? Start on the positive. Yeah, I noticed that too. Really proud of something. Point something out that you can say that they did well, especially if it's about their effort, energy level, right? Or commitment to something that was difficult, right? And then maybe ask them, what's something you think you want to work on? What's something you think there's room for improvement on, right? That's about it. Honestly, that should probably be about it for the conversation, unless they're receptive and wanting to talk more about it. And so that's the key, is be aware, read the room. What's their body language like? Are they open? Are they engaged? Are they shutting down? Please bite your tongue. And again, I know how hard it is. I witnessed it, experienced it. Didn't witness, I experienced it just yesterday, right? Yeah.
It is
yeah.
hard.
Being aware of their perspective, right? What do they seem to want? And really being able to recognize and praise effort over outcome, right? Very challenging too is the difference between soreness and injury. I'll admit that one time my son playing basketball, he came off and he really wanted to take a break. And I was concerned that maybe he was missing out on key plays in their practice, right? I didn't see anything happen where he got injured, and I was watching. But he was adamant though. So after a little time, I said, all right, I got to trust him. I got to trust him. Then we go get the x-rays. Sure enough, had a fracture in his ankle, right? It didn't look like there was anything that could be done. So be aware that sometimes it can look like soreness or seem like soreness, but there's really an injury there. At the same time, we want to be able to teach our kids about those two different things, right? Things are going to be tough. You're going to have to push through soreness. You're going to have to push through sometimes, muscle spasms, sometimes cramping or things like that. How do you prevent it? What do you do about it? But sometimes you have to push through those things. But teaching that there's a difference between soreness and injury. And if it's injury, that's when we communicate to our coach. That's when we communicate to our parents, and really talking a bit about that. If you're truly injured, your coach needs to know, I need to know, so I can advocate for you and help. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Jen, anything else in the chat that we want to be sure to address right now?
Yes. Hopefully you can hear my dog barking. That's awesome. What should a parent be listening for besides them being upset or happy about competing? So this is a question from Patrick. What should you be listening for besides them being upset or happy about competing?
Great question. And so Patrick, do you mean listening in terms of what we were talking about earlier, or are you talking about kind of in general? What should we be listening to? It's a great question. I just want to understand a little bit more.
And Patrick, if you want to unmute, you can.
Yeah,
I can. I would just you kind of touched up on a little bit on it though, but I guess not wanting to be discouragement, right? But what should I be listening to besides them being excited or being upset that they lost or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. Well, I think you would be listening for their level of ownership, their level of engagement, and their intrinsic motivation, right? Does my son or daughter really seem to want this? Even though when it's like, Friday night, they have to go to practice, they're going to probably complain and understand that. But are you seeing that they're really wanting this? Then that's something that, they really want to play. There's something they're getting out of this. You see their smile when they're in the game, when they're hanging out with friends and teammates after practice, things like that. You're looking for body language. You're looking for their level of engagement and their level of ownership, right? Big question that comes up for me is, if my son or daughter is complaining during the season, when do we quit? When do we quit? Do we not quit? Right? And this is really an individual, one-on-one kind of thing to look into. But in general, I will suggest this: if your child or you or both really has committed to that team and that season, then in general, I think you really want to finish that season and finish it out, because I think you can really develop a bit of a habit of quitting when things get tough if you don't. I will say, however, there are exceptions. There are exceptions, and the exceptions are if my son or daughter is experiencing, of course, anything that feels abusive or unhelpful, even that maybe the way they're responding to the coaches or things are affecting their self-confidence in bigger ways than just the sport. And it's not, you've tried everything possible to try to change that. Then here's what I like you people to think about. There's a great book called Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend wrote a great book about boundaries, and we need to have boundaries in things, right? And that's kind of a boundary, is I think trying to suggest, at least this isn't true in my family, is that we suggest that one of our values is we don't quit things in the middle of them. We finish them out, right? Unless the other book that they wrote after that is called Necessary Endings. And so there are extreme situations where this may be unhelpful completely, and you're seeing your child, kind of just sink down in terms of who they are, themselves, etc., and it's affecting them too negatively. And those situations, those might be necessary endings, and it might be time to quit. But I would say those should really be the exceptions. And in general, you look to, let's finish out the season, and then we'll have a conversation about whether you're going to sign up again, whether we're going to play next season, etc. Right? Ownership and responsibility is the key thing, I think, to develop. Make sure that you're helping them every year show more responsibility and take more and more ownership. So things that they're upset about with things like playing time, etc., you start by encouraging them to ask coach, what could I do to improve? Is there something I can do to get more playing time? Have them ask first. Again, it might shift if it's a very young athlete, right? But in general. And on playing time, it's really important as a sport parent to ask yourself, is this my concern or theirs? Do they seem happy as punch, sitting on the bench? That can be frustrating, by the way. It can be very frustrating. It's like they don't even seem to care. They're just sitting there, well, for a very young athlete, the reason is probably because young athletes, their motivation is not what ours is. And it's typically not championships, trophy winning. Well, they do like the trophies, don't get me wrong. I don't love that we seem to get one just for signing up and participating either, by the way. But what they really sign up to play sports is, it's for the fun, it's for the friendships. And so they'll play what their friends are playing, right? So ask yourself, is this my concern or theirs? And if it's theirs, and only if it's theirs too, then you advocate for them to ask coach and take responsibility for, what can I do to improve? What can I demonstrate? And then if that doesn't work, if for time or time again, you might ask the coach that same question. Is there anything that Roger can do to increase his playing time or Sally's playing time, right? But I would really be cautious about that again, because sometimes our best intentions can end up hurting our athlete. And then they end up, kind of having less playing time or being seen as the whiner or complainer, right? Etc. What else you got, Jen?
Yeah, that's it. I was just going to see if anybody else wanted to come on to see, ask any questions. I don't have any in the chat, but I also want to add, while you guys are putting in the chat, that as we grow as parenting, a lot of times we forget to kind of grow ourselves with the age of the kid. So if you've always been the one that I'm just going to call coach and fix this for you, that's when you start to need to ask yourself, how old are they? What is their, responsibility? And so you're taking your parenting up a level of the notch to match where they are as an athlete. So that's just kind of a thing that we often talk about in the coaching world, is to raise up your parenting, to grow with your child and your teen. So that's important to remember as well. I don't have any questions right now, John. So,
all right. Yeah. Well, no, I love that. I love that. Absolutely. And I think the idea of really being able to lead ourselves well is important. And that's what I really teach my athletes when I'm working with them as an individual or as a team is, lead yourself well first, then lead your team, right? by example, by encouragement, right? There were some comments, by the way, about, kind of how do we encourage our athlete to lead well, right? And sometimes we see the opposite. Sometimes we see, I had a very good volleyball player that I was working with the other day, and she was really struggling to see the rest of her team lose energy, when they're struggling in tournaments. And she feels like she's the only one that's like keeping the energy level up and working hard and really trying hard. And so really trying to help that athlete, look for opportunities to encourage their teammates as opposed to putting them down or discouraging them, and really remembering that the best thing you can do is lead by example. And same thing for us parents, right? Is to really demonstrate that first is how do I, demonstrate good communication? How do I demonstrate good attitude? That I go through those 9 mental skills as well. And I got to be working on really being able to visualize, my son or daughter improving in the future. When I'm not seeing it, I've got to first believe that it might be possible before it might show up, right? I may not see it, etc. Right? One of the things that we'll be going into more in depth with your athlete or with you, if you jump on for our great program coming up, is more about anxiety and performance. It's something that one of the main mental skills is coping with anxiety and dealing with it, right? And also the idea that, is it bad? Is it good? Right? And so we're going to kind of get into that shortly as well. Jen, do you want to do Q&A before we get into that more in depth?
Yeah.
I
put something on, Patrick says good stuff. So he's hearing you, John. Good job. So if anybody has any questions, just hop on. You can just turn off your mic and just kind of come on, get an opportunity to talk with John about a question you have. Otherwise, while y'all are doing that, I'm going to talk to you real quick that we have coming up because I know our hour's about up. So JennBrownCoaching.com/booking, which is where you signed up for this free class. We are offering 4 weeks. So it's going to be starting next Sunday for 2 weeks. And then we're going to take that Sunday off because it's Easter Sunday. And then we're going to have 2 more sessions. And what we're charging you is for 1 session with either Dr. Beach or myself. It's going to be, for the next 3 days, it's going to be $199 for 4 more hours of very specific. Today was pretty outlined as far as, we wanted to umbrella the information, but the next 4 weeks, so it's just a Sunday at 5:00, same thing as today. And you're going to get so much information and your kiddo is going to get so much information, but it's not just for your teen. If you're saying my teen's busy, they don't like to sit down and, come, because that way you can teach them, you can guide them. And it's, it's half the battle is knowing ourselves. You can't parent well. You can't parent an athlete well until you know what is good for you. So this is just as much for you. So you can sign up there. The next 3 days, it's going to be $199. After the 3 days, the price is going to bump up to $225. So if you can hop on and so Asher's asking, will there be more sessions in the future that aren't in the thick of baseball season? I get it. I'm also in baseball season. But the good news is, Asher, is that you can throw in your earbuds and be present while you're finishing up. Because Sunday night, usually, hopefully, as you're gathering your rings from the tournament, that you can hop on. So this is the only one we have for now. So it would be a great opportunity. And so you can go ahead and sign up. The next 3 days, it's $199. And then after that, it's $225. And we will kick off just like tonight, next Sunday for 2 sessions. We'll take a week off. So you have 2 sessions, a week off, and then 2 more sessions. So I know, I hear you, because when is a good time? So
it can be hard. It can be hard. We went back and forth about the right time for this. And we know that there's practice pretty much every evening, or at least for a lot of athletes on weeknights, and parents are working. And so we tried to come up with, there is no perfect time, but what we felt like was the most available time, Sunday evening. Oftentimes, they're back from practice and things like that. They're getting ready, and families are getting ready to get ready for the next week. And so we hope that this time works. If it doesn't, give us feedback, and we'll we'll maybe think about the next one we do, shifting the time. But we sure hope your athlete can join us. We hope you can join us, or one of the other for sure. Well, absolutely. I hope that you guys can recognize the value of having 4 hours of time to really dive into and help your athlete in specific way deal with these mental skills and really develop the basics of developing a great mindset and really being able to develop things like mental toughness as well. But I want to give a little bit of a kind of preview of that, and and give you guys something valuable, I think, that is so important for you to understand and for your athletes to understand. And that is kind of the connection between anxiety and performance, right? So question is anxiety bad for performance? And then of course we want to know, well, how does an athlete reduce anxiety if it's too high? So throw it in the chat if you can. Any responses there, Jen, in the chat?
Oh, Patrick was asking, is this open to others we may know that could use this great insight? And I'm just saying, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Pass it on.
Absolutely.
We're recording this, and John, I didn't mean to cut you off, but Patrick, we're recording this, and I'm going to email it to you. So if you wanted to pass it on to a friend and say, you know what, I see your kid is struggling, and we've had parent conversations. This is what all the moms and I talk about in the stands, right? Is, oh man, he came home and he's so down on himself. And so, when you have somebody, of course, pass it on. No big deal. We would love to have anybody that could use it. This is why we're trying to reach out to as many people as we can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great question, Patrick. And again, absolutely. Whether that's someone that's a business leader, or maybe their son or daughter isn't an athlete, but their son or daughter is in band and there's a lot of tryouts and performance. They're in theater, right? Keep in mind. And so obviously if we have someone that's a student, that's a performance arena as well. We will absolutely modify that for them and incorporate examples that apply to their area of performance. So that's a great question. And please do pass it on to others, not just athlete parents. Absolutely. Yeah. And so of course, anxiety is not bad for performance. Let's take a look at what the research shows, right? And I always think this is great that when they've done the research on this is called the Yerkes-Dodson law, okay? I'm not sure if on your screen, if it's blocked a little bit there with some of the control panel stuff, but at the bottom it says Yerkes-Dodson law, okay? Now, a lot of times when they study things like this, they'll call them a rule, right? Or something like that. But this has been studied so much and so validated that they call it a law. That says something there, Yerkes-Dodson law. And it's all about the connection between, on this side of the graph, performance, low or weak performance, and high or strong performance over here. And over here, level of anxiety. Low anxiety here on this side, all the way over to high anxiety over here. And so what we know is when there's no anxiety, performance tends to be very poor, right? This might make sense to us intuitively too, but if you think about it, if there's no anxiety, you don't care. You're not concerned. You're not fired up. You're not ready, right? And so it's a good thing to be nervous. It's a good thing to be anxious. That's something you really want to share with your son or daughter, is that, oh, you're nervous? Great. Everybody else is too. Let's use that. How do you use that energy? It's just energy. And then I often share with them a great example that I'll save due to time, but that helps them kind of visualize that and see it, right? Now, of course, if anxiety is at the very high level, kind of the level of almost like a panic attack or hyperventilation, then performance tends to be low as well. Often because it's very hard to focus. It's very hard to stay aware of what I need to do. And we're just really not able to tap into good logic or thinking at all if we're at panic level. But in between those two is the ideal range. And so right in the middle between low and high anxiety, this is where the best performances happen time and time again. So this is really helpful, I think, when athletes do struggle with nervousness or anxiety, is to help them see that as a positive, and then also helping them bring it down just a little bit if it's too high. And in order to do that, we often use relaxation strategies. We use breathing techniques. We use things like progressive muscle relaxation that we will teach them during the course as well, that will really bring it just from too high to just right. And so that's the key, is really helping them understand they shouldn't be scared of anxiety. They shouldn't think it's a bad thing. They should just the opposite, see it as a positive, as a good thing that they can use, but help them. And that's what we will do, is help them really kind of use that energy in a positive way, help them lower it to the right amount if it's too high. So that's just an example of the type of thing that we will really go into much more detail with you or with your athlete or with your performer even when we go into our 4-week program. So we're really excited to have you guys tonight. And I really want to encourage you guys to sign up for our program, send it on to others that you think would benefit. And we hope that this is just, giving you some tools and ideas and a bit of a flavor of the type of interaction and the type of learning that will take place, an opportunity for you just to step back from the situation, or your athlete to step back from their busy, athlete life, and be able to kind of gain more awareness of the mental skills and use them, the tools that I know I wish I had when I was a young athlete. How about you, Jen? You performed at a very high level. I know in I believe volleyball, maybe another sport too. Do you wish you'd had these skills when you were a young athlete?
Yes, I was a gymnast and then went to volleyball. And yes, both. I just remember like throwing up at the beginning. I was so nervous. So if I could have had your let me come down a notch, I could have been in the middle of that law. And so, yes, absolutely. So yeah, this is all good stuff. And John was talking about when to bring out the music and when to do the breathing. And he was explaining this all to me, and I was like, genius. So I think it's going to be super helpful when we start to cover that in the classes. So yeah. You guys are rock stars for coming. We appreciate it. And I will send out another email to you guys and let you, have a little more insight on the class coming up, but certainly hope to see you there. So
I hope so. 3 days for the discount. We hope you see you there. Jump on it, take action. I know you'll be glad you did. So will your athlete or performer. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Let's see. I can